All right, welcome, Steven, really tan man. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Steven, you're at Really Tan Man. You're the creator of Masa Chips, the Ancient Crunch. You were also a former software developer. Is that right? Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit more about your background, man. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
So after college, I studied math in college, and then I went on to become a software engineer at one of the big tech companies. I worked there for 2 years, and the last year or so, I started working on Masa, and then eventually I got so busy with that, and then I quit. And as of September of last year, I am a full-time chip maker, and not the silicon kind, the tortilla
Yeah,
kind.
that's right. From one chip to the next.
Yes.
Is there anything? Because usually when a business owner, at least the case with me and some people I talked about, when they create a new product line or new business, it's because they are a product of their product. They felt the need in the market and they just made it happen. Is there something with the chip market that you found was really wrong?
Yeah, so I have avoided seed oils just sort of inadvertently ever since I discovered health like 10 years ago, because if you don't eat processed foods, you don't eat junk foods, you don't eat out very much,
Yeah.
you just naturally avoid seed oils. But it never became a big focus of mine until about 2.5 years ago, when I really critically examined every single thing that I ever ate for seed oils.
Mhm.
And I found out that pretty much the only thing that I was still consuming that had them was tortilla chips. So at
Mhm.
the time, I was single, and cooking is tedious and difficult. And so, bachelor life, it's cooking is a big drag.
Yeah.
And tortilla chips are a pretty helpful part of what should be a good diet, right?
Mhm.
Carbs in general are the hardest parts of a meal to make. And so if you can buy the carb already made, then all it takes is throw some ground beef on the stove for 30 seconds and some salt, and that's like a meal right there. So
Mhm.
tortilla chips played a big part in my personal diet, even as a health person. I would get like organic tortilla chips, of course. Again, they had seed oils, but before, up until now, I wasn't really paying too much attention to it. So when I had to finally get rid of tortilla chips out of my diet, it made my life more difficult. No more
Yeah.
nachos, no more, cheese and chips and ground beef. Uh,
Yeah.
it made my life harder. And so there was about a year or so there where I was like living a chip-free existence. And then it turned out at some point, this is about a year ago. No, about 2 years ago, actually. Yeah, we're coming up on 2 years ago. So New Year's Day of 2022 is when the idea for Masa appeared, because I was hanging out with some friends right after New Year's. One of them was eating, who knows, Tostitos, whatever he got delivered to the Airbnb. And I started giving him a lot of crap for it. And
Good.
yeah, I'm just like, one of my friends eating seed oil chips. Like, how could you?
Can't happen. No.
Can't have this. And so we got to talking about how this is sort of classic conversation when like a healthy person says, "Oh, why are you eating this?" Whatever. The non-healthy person is always like, "Well, hey, at least I enjoy my life. I might not live as long as you, but at least I enjoy my life." And I'm like, I think you're missing the point, because the food I eat is actually delicious. Like,
Mhm.
all the best things are available to me as an eater of real food.
Yeah.
Raw milk, grass-fed beef, honey, maple syrup, sourdough bread, you name it. All the things I eat are delicious. It just so happens to be that it's not necessarily easy to make all of them. And
Mhm.
tortilla chips are one of those things, right? You could have healthy tortilla chips, but you can't buy them anywhere because no one makes them.
Mhm.
And so I start describing this to him, and he basically challenges me like, well, if no one else is making it, why don't you go make them? Naturally. And so over the next few months, we worked on that. I did what anyone trying to start a food startup would do. I talked to the food startup consultants, asked them, "Hey, who can we find to go manufacture this product for us?" Because that's what you do. You don't make it
Mhm.
yourself. And we quickly realized that no one was going to be able to make tortilla chips and beef tallow as I had intended,
Yeah.
because the animal fat poses various challenges for the big manufacturers who produce most of the food that you see in the grocery store.
Mhm.
And so they were basically like, you have to use coconut oil or avocado oil. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Those would no longer make the ideal tortilla chip. They'd be maybe okay, but they would not make the perfect tortilla chip. So it's got to be beef tallow. And then after, a few months going back and forth about this, I decided to just screw it and make it myself. And so I bought a turkey fryer from Costco, some grass-fed beef tallow, and some organic corn tortillas. Set up shop in my parents' deck in their backyard. Successfully avoided burning the house down with my propane tank and 350-degree boiling pot of tallow. And I made the first prototype of Masa Chips, and they turned out great. I certainly enjoyed them. And then the moment of truth was really when I fed them to my parents and my extended family who was over. I think it was Easter at the time, and they also really liked them. And so here we have a bunch of people that are much less health conscious than me, who said they literally taste better than the conventional chips that you can get at like the grocery store. They taste better than the Tostitos. And like, now that is something you don't encounter every day. Most of the healthy things, if you try to convince your family, oh, eat this healthy thing, it's better for you, they're going to roll their eyes, and rightly so, because they're going to try it and it's going to taste like cardboard or kale or chia seeds or whatever the hell else is in it. And this was the exact opposite of that. This is the better version. And so that's when I knew we kind of have the holy grail of snacks, right? It's healthy enough for the health freaks like me, but it's delicious enough for every normal person ever. And so then we went about making it, at scale relative to that time. Sold our first bag in July of 2022, so about a year and a half ago. And 2 months later, I quit my job, and we've been doing this ever since.
Congratulations. That's amazing. You hit the nail on the head on something so true, though, in the health space, that I notice this all the time. People who are health conscious are gaslighting other people into trying to convince them that their food tastes good when it doesn't. Particularly kale and stuff.
No one wants your kale chips. No one wants your sugar-free protein cookies.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste good. Just like
exactly. It's inauthentic, and you can tell because you can't really lie to your tongue. You can't really lie to 10,000 plus years of evolution. I know. So I read some of your content and that you've tried different diets. I know you went in paleo, but there's something interesting about the last 10,000 years of agriculture and everything. But it's really interesting how your body adapts itself to certain types of food. So if you do start eating airheads and a bunch of junk, you're going to start, your gut microbiome is going to prefer that type of junk food. But when you introduce real beef tallow, real fruit, real food, whole foods, almost every single human I've seen, their eyes light up that this is returning to home. Yeah.
I wouldn't say people adapt. Okay, well they do adapt, but not in the sense that is good. What happens is people become desensitized, calloused, if you will. So the unhealthy people walking around, breathing in their artificial fragrances, with the artificial light coming in, the blue light coming in at night, their fluoridated water and their pesticide food, their body is sort of shut down because of all this toxic exposure. And so they get to this point where they're able to function, but kind of in this, if you imagine a turtle in a shell kind of state. They're calloused to all the harms of the outside world. They don't even notice these things. They are literally desensitized, right? I used to do this sort of little party trick in college where I would have my friends fill a glass with tap water and fill a glass with Brita filter water and then fill a glass with the water that I drank, which at the time was from my Berkey filter with fluoride attachments, and do a blind taste test. And I didn't even have to taste the water to get it right. I could just smell it. And then, but they would have no idea. They'd be like, what do you mean? It's just water, right? People walk in, and people who are like the sort of boomer people, sort of boomer mentality of oh, what do you need bottled water for? Tap water is just fine. They literally can't taste the difference. It's kind of sad if you think about it. They are unable to appreciate the nuance. It's sort of like someone who doesn't know a lot about wine, and you get them 3 different red wines. Oh, it tastes the same to me. But the sommelier can tell you, of course, which field of which vineyard from what year the glass of wine is from. That's the difference. So unhealthy people are desensitized, and the process of becoming healthy is also a process of sensitizing yourself to reality. And it makes sense why people sort of need to be so unhealthy to survive the modern world, because it's just such a pile of shit all around us all the time, everywhere. that you have to be desensitized to not freak out just existing in it, you know?
Yeah. I like what you just did right there. You did it a few minutes earlier. You are putting yourself in their shoes. Like you really do have empathy for like why they're acting the way they are. Like that does make sense. Like fast food, everything. Like why are you eating fast? Because to take a moment to really notice and be sensitive and aware of what you're eating could cause a lot of people like immense distress. So if they're like, what is the seed oil? Oh, they bleached this. Like this used to be used for motors. Like this could be like an engine lubricant. Like that is too uncomfortable. So a lot of people just, like you said, they just go on cruise control and they aren't sensitized. Really good way of putting it.
Yeah, but I'm not even saying they're like actively shutting out outside information. They can't even perceive the difference. Like they
Right.
don't know that there's seed oils in the thing, right? They
Yeah.
just it's fried food. You know, like when we first started in the little kitchen we had for the first few months of making masa, we had our own. It was a shared kitchen, and so we had our deep fryer with the tallow in it, and next to ours was the other deep fryer with the seed oils in it that they used to make whatever the hell they were making. And without even anything frying, just the oil itself, I could stick my nose in there and smell a complete difference between my fryer and their fryer. Right, completely different.
Yeah.
Their fryer smells like a sort of carnival, gross, like funnel cake type of thing, and our fryer, I didn't know how to describe it. It was just so subtle. It wasn't. It didn't even smell like much at all. But again, people can't tell the difference, right? McDonald's switched from tallow to vegetable oil in their for the French fries at some point. And I think it's actually kind of shocking that people didn't seem to notice. You know, people are still go to McDonald's and still get the French fries, and it's like I wonder, like, if, for example, if I were alive at the time and I was like, oh, I eat tallow fries at McDonald's, and all of a sudden I go into McDonald's one day, I put a fry in my mouth, and I'm like, what the hell is this? But apparently the mass of Americans did not have that experience because they're so desensitized to everything.
Gotcha. So I got a two-pronged question.
Yeah.
Setting off that. The first is, how or why do you think you've become so sensitive to this? And the second one is, how can others become more sensitive, build their sensitivity?
Yeah, well, so for me specifically, I think I naturally could always appreciate more of a nuance in the world. So this is well before I became interested, like a health person. I think, I don't know, I must have been 10 or 12 or something. At Easter, we had M&Ms, classic candy. And my cousins were making fun of me because I told them that I don't like the brown M&Ms. And they're like, what are you talking about? All M&Ms taste the same. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? The different colors, they're different flavors, obviously. Right? And they're like, no, M&Ms all taste the same. They're different colors, but they all taste the same. And I'm like, that is complete bullshit. Another blind, I guess I have a thing for this then. Another blind taste test. So I made them like blindfold me and taste test different M&Ms. And I think I did 10 of the M&Ms. I still remember this. I got 7 of them right on the first try, 2 of them right on the second try. And so that's like 90% accuracy by the second try.
Wild.
And all of the brown M&Ms I got on the first try, 100% of them. And they were like, they still didn't believe me after it. And they were like, I can't taste the difference, you know? And like, so I always had the ability to like appreciate that sort of subtlety. So yeah, brown M&Ms, because I never liked chocolate. That's kind of the whole point here. I didn't like the brown M&Ms because I didn't like chocolate, and the brown M&Ms taste like chocolate.
Gotcha.
Even though they're chocolate-filled candies, like I like the sugary part and not the chocolate part.
Yeah, it's subtle to you. That's really interesting. I mean, it definitely became a gift for us and everyone else because now you can really differentiate the flavors. I know you have a lime flavor, and a lot of lime flavorings are just that. They're artificial flavorings, and they taste a bit like metallic or weird.
Right, you can taste instantly that it's like some chemical bullshit.
Yeah.
And it is like the ingredients. There are healthy tortilla chip brands, quote unquote, that I will not name, but we outsell both of them in Erewhon. So, you know, if you live in LA, you can go on the shelves and take a look at this. They use, so one of them uses lime juice powder, and they make lime juice powder by basically sprinkling lime juice on maltodextrin and dehydrating it. And so that's why you'll see in the ingredients, you'll see lime and juice, and you'll see maltodextrin. So that's one of them. And the other decided, who even needs the limes? Let's just combine lime oil, which is like the sort of essential oil extracted from like the lime peel. Combine lime oil with citric acid for the sour flavor, because acids are sour tasting. And that's their lime flavor, right? There's no lot. Where's the fruit? Where are the limes?
That's so crazy.
And this became such a problem for us because, I mean, I probably should have done a little bit more research before deciding to make the second flavor lime. But I was like, oh, everyone has a lime chip. It can't be that hard. First flavor that we make, let's make it a lime chip. I probably should have done a little bit more research for this, because you can't buy lime powder that's made from limes only.
What do you do?
You can't. Well, you can make it, but you can't buy it. There is no vendor on earth that I can just go to and be like, hi, some organic lime powder, please, with no other ingredients. That doesn't exist. It's either lime juice powder with maltodextrin or some weird BS. And so those are the options. And obviously I'm not going to accept that. And so we took limes, we bought a bunch of limes, organic limes, and sliced them up and dehydrate them and grind them into a powder.
Okay.
And that's the lime powder that we make. It's incredibly tedious and incredibly expensive, but that's what we've done. And only recently have we gotten to the size where we're able to pay some seasoning company to like do that for us.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, but that still hasn't happened yet, right? This deal is ongoing. Like we're still negotiating the terms. So like today, if I want lime powder for lime chips, I need to have one of my employees go slice limes by hand and dry them out.
That's wild. Well, there's a lot of effort that comes with aesthetics too, and like comes with value. You know, it's all part of the package deal, and I like how you're not cutting corners to get there, which is great.
Right. I mean, and this is the other, I guess another, if we're talking about the sensitivity thing, it's funny. So the concept of the canary in a coal mine?
I don't know.
So the canary is a bird, and the canary in the coal mine is like basically very sensitive to, I forget the specifics, but somehow it can tell if there's no oxygen in the coal mine.
Okay.
And it can do that before the humans can tell. And so they would keep canaries in a cage in the coal mine. And if the canary like passed out or died, they would see it. And then they would know that there was some gas leak or who knows what. And then they better get the hell out of there, because they'll suffocate in a few minutes if they don't.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the canary is like this advanced warning. It's more sensitive to this potential threat. And therefore, like the rest of the people look to it to tell them if there's some impending problem. And so my co-founder and I have this joke, because he calls me a canary, because like we'll try all these like not competitors products or other CPG products or whatever, and like he's one of those people that can't tell the difference between any of this, right? He has no idea. Lime powder, lime oil, maltodextrin, organic this, no concept for any of this. He has his other talents, of course, but he doesn't have this thing. So he calls me a canary. And it's funny because we travel, we go on a business trip here and there, and I'm always complaining about, oh, this water tastes like crap. We get bottled water and like, oh, I can taste the plastic in this bottled water. Or, you don't like the fragrances in this hotel room. You don't smell you don't smell that. And he's like, no, he does not know any of this, or he can't even perceive it. And so the joke is that I'm the canary, and that's like why we're here, because I can figure out that all the chips suck, but no one else seems to be able to do that. But then obviously once you make it and give it to people, they can realize, wait, these actually are better. But it requires like they would never go out and seek that out on their own and do that, which is why I guess no one else has done this beforehand.
Yeah, no, that you're keeping us from passing out in the coal mine.
Yeah, exactly. And as far as other people doing this, I mean, when you get healthy, you become sensitive. Those are, I would venture to say that those two things are possibly synonymous. Because if you think about it, it's like health allows you to utilize the full potential, like actualize the full potential of your being. Basically, humans can they can perceive, they can appreciate a lot of minute differences. They can understand all of this. They can create all these things, but they're unable to do so because they're so desensitized to the world around them. They can't even tell if there's a problem. Right? They don't even know about it. And so becoming healthier is the process of kind of getting rid of those calluses, getting rid of that shell. And it's why you'll see in the health discourse on the internet, a lot of the people who are like that are always talking about moving out to the woods or getting a farm in Montana or moving to Costa Rica or some like natural pristine paradise,
Mhm.
because the modern world is not fit for healthy people who are able to appreciate and perceive and appreciate how bad everything is, right? I
Yeah.
go to the city and it's like, I mean, it's intolerable for a lot of people, but they don't even see, they don't notice all the things that are that, like, people say New York City tap water is the best tap water. There are people who drink New York tap water,
That's
right?
wild.
It smells like an indoor swimming pool to me, but they're like, oh, it's great water, you know. They don't notice I wear my blue light blocking glasses when I go out at night. They're like red, they look like red sunglasses. If I don't do that, like, the blue lights will, they physically hurt. It's like, ow, how do you guys not even tell? And they're just like, oh, you know, it's like
Yeah.
the guy in the meme with the guy in the corner in the party.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I bet they don't even realize that they're like swimming in blue light or something, and he's got his red light glasses on. Um,
100%.
it's like that. And the problem, it's not like it's blue light is more harmful to me than it is to anyone else. It's like I'm just able to recognize those harms,
Yeah.
but
And
other people can't. And people should, because this is how, and this is like how you actually fix the world, right? People are unable to perceive the problems around them. They don't notice them, and therefore they don't demand that they be solved or make the solution themselves. But the more people that are able to perceive them, the harder their life will be, basically, until they either demand that the problem be solved
Mhm.
or they fix it themselves. Like,
Yeah.
I think the whole modern, and this is why seed oils go hand in hand with the whole modern plastic, ugly strip mall, Walmart, gas station, highway, like, plasticization of American life, if you
Mhm.
will. Like, they all go hand in hand, right? A culture of people that can't even tell that their food is fried in seed oils is not a culture of people that will even notice that all of their buildings and dwelling spaces are ugly as hell and made of cheap materials, right?
Yeah.
It goes beyond that. All right, do people know that their houses are made out of more like basically toothpicks and cardboard? Like, almost every American house outside of South Florida is made out of toothpicks and cardboard, 2x4s, wood, and sheetrock, cardboard. Uh,
Yeah.
if you go to most parts of Europe, they build their houses out of cinder blocks and stone and like terracotta roofing and
Mhm.
plaster on the walls. It's like a solid thing. But the standard American house, I saw some video on Twitter the other day. People are just starting to realize this, I guess. The standard American house, like, can't even support the weight of the people inside of it. The video on Twitter was like some woman fell through the floor, or her daughter like fell through the floor of her house, and it's like, people don't realize this because they see a solid wall there, they see a ceiling, and they're like, oh, that's solid, right?
Mhm.
People are not very inquisitive about the world around them, but they have any idea how easy it is to punch a hole through their house. All right, they're like, oh, make sure to
Yeah.
lock the windows at night. Dude, someone with a razor blade could break into your house through the wall itself, because you can get through 2 layers of sheetrock and some styrofoam insulation with a razor blade. You know, you don't need to break through a window. You can
Yeah.
just cut a hole in the side of a house with a knife, because that's how weak our buildings are made. And again, people don't notice, or if they do notice, they don't seem to care. And this is why the problem persists, because they're not able to appreciate this distinction and opt for the better version.
Yeah. And you really wrapped it up together really nicely with that plastification of the US and modern culture. I think like you're very, very wise in saying that, because it does seem that sensitivity begets structure, and it begets, like, for instance, if you are desensitized and you're to your food or to all this, you can become desensitized to like moral corruption, or
Yeah.
like you said, aesthetic corruption and all that. That's why I have massive respect to the Amish. They've kept a really central role of tradition alive in everything, even their food and their everything. And you can see the quality of the food. Like, people who are living in Pennsylvania or New York, they go out of their way to get Amish products because it is
Yeah,
just that
I get
better.
Amish milk and cheese delivered.
Yeah,
We do this for sure.
yeah, and I think that's one of the things too. Like, if you don't have to look that far, we are losing recipes. Like, our modern like day women want to make families. Like, we are losing recipes, and it's kind of
Oh
sad
yeah,
to
this
see.
is super interesting. The I forget who talked about this a few years ago, or something. I remember seeing this sort of analysis that, like, culture because we have archaeology. We can go look at some records, some book, some tablet, some burial site or whatever, and try to figure out how people lived.
Mhm.
But most culture is never written down. And culture, like especially the aspects that we would consider culture, clothing, food, um, are two of the more major components of that. Culture is kept alive by women throughout history.
Mm.
It's like an unbroken chain of like mother teaching daughter how to make or do whatever. And they're not writing it down. And so it's like when people look at sort of ancient Roman cuisine or medieval cuisine or whatever, it's always like the aristocratic recipe handbook because that's who decided to write it down. Or it's the it's like the cooking books of the 19th century or whatever. It was very, or 19th 17th century or 18th century, very rare to find written documents of how everyday people are living because everyone just assumes that everyone knows how everyday people live. And so
Yeah.
the things that get written down are not the mundane things, but the sort of fancy things. And
Mhm.
that's so if you don't have that stuff written down, it's got to get passed down. And
Mhm.
so women are the passers of that down. And
Right.
if they don't do that, we lose culture.
Yeah. No, not to be an alarmist or anything. You're totally right. We do lose culture. Like overnight, a generation ago, people say like the peak of American culture was pre 9/11, and you look back then, it was completely different. The tolerances we had and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is another way of talking about this whole sensitivity thing is it's just having standards, right?
Yeah.
And people have no standards in anything, and it shows, right? You can
Yeah.
like in how they dress in public, in how they speak, right? Go watch a movie from the 1950s and listen to how they talk, like their diction, the way
Yeah.
like they don't ever, even myself, I don't know how to talk correctly. No offense, you don't know how to talk correctly.
Yeah.
Very few people know how to speak properly. Like we all have this thing called vocal fry, which is like
Yeah.
in your throat. It's like kind of raspy, like I'm exaggerating, but that's how people talk. And if you go
Mhm.
listen to some movie from the 50s or earlier, people are like bellowing. It's like how does that sound even come from a person? It's like it's so big, it's so loud, but because people don't even speak correctly, you know.
Yeah.
Let alone like grammar and word choice and vocabulary and all these other things. Like the physical noises don't even come out right.
Yeah. No, there's no clowns back there, and there's no one like intentionally being an ass. They're like every like head of family in those movies are coming in. They're like owning the role. Like everyone has a role. There's like you said, standards. That's a good way to summarize it. One quick question with that though. I see you have the Jesus piece.
Yeah,
I do too.
nice.
I think that is something that's really make it made me really happy to see on Instagram when I started taking Instagram seriously, spending more time on it. All these pages popping up with like more and more younger guys like really leading their brands, their personal brands with their faith. And I know you and your wife, you guys are you have big pages and you guys aren't shying away. You guys run businesses and you're not shying away from your faith. When you guys got married, that was awesome. That you guys posted pictures of it. It looked like it was a traditional, like Orthodox wedding. That's awesome. And I don't think we're seeing enough of that because there's a lot of messages I get when I post about stuff about Jesus. People are like, oh, I really appreciate seeing this because I think this way too. And we're just not hearing enough of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct, and not to like dunk on Protestants too much, but and I don't know what denomination of Christianity
I'm
you're
Catholic. I'm Catholic.
okay. Yeah. Um, but this is another example of like standards, right?
Mhm.
When you don't have a standard of conducting your liturgy, right? There's no process to follow and you just do whatever you want. It quickly devolves into something that's like hardly recognizable and full of laziness and
Mm.
just like makes no sense. Um, and that process of watering down the religious ritual itself is counterintuitively the thing that drives people away from it.
Mhm.
So there's so a lot, especially Catholics, have been affected by this over the over recent history, so the past 70 years or so. Um,
Yeah, the
where
traditional Latin mass.
huh?
With the loss of the traditional
Yeah,
Latin mass, for instance.
yeah, and a whole bunch of policies. I grew up Catholic as well, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but we would have sometimes we would have like a guitar in our church music.
Mm.
I'm like, and people are like, oh, what's wrong with the guitar? It sounds nice. It's like, no, you don't understand. That's just how it starts, right? Students, right now it's an acoustic guitar, and before you know it, we got people hang gliding in front of the Jumbotron, whatever things, in like a sports stadium.
Yeah.
It's not a concert, right? But the problem with watering it down is they're like, oh, we're gonna modernize it. We're gonna make it appeal to more people. Like, no, you're not, because the people that want you to do that are by definition your lukewarm believers. Like,
Mm.
they're not your core audience. They're, to use business parlance, they're not your target customer demographic, right?
Yeah.
So if you try to appeal to people that aren't your customers, what's going to happen? Well, those people are going to remain not customers. They're going to, or at least continue being lukewarm ones. And worse, you're going to alienate your actual customers, the actual people paying the bills. And that's a recipe for disaster, right? Because the people on the outsides, it's like the sort of the what is it, the snowball effect or whatever. They'll keep saying, oh, do this for us. Oh, relax this standard for us. Oh, we want this, or oh, we want that. And then before you know it, you have very little left of your original thing. Meanwhile, the people that cared about your original thing are gone. They've converted to Greek Orthodoxy, like me, or something. And even then, there's problems in the Orthodox churches too, where like there's just continuing, reduction in standards. And then the people that are left don't give a crap. And then you're like, why does no one show up anymore? Well, that's why. Like, how cool is Gregorian chanting?
Oh,
Like,
the best, dude.
how awesome is
playlist.
the pipe organ, right? How much more would people want to like go to church if there were an army of like monks and nuns like chanting, and the entire like cathedral is like vibrating from this?
Yeah.
How many more people would want to go to church if that were your liturgy than some like washed up dude in a guitar? Or like a choir of volunteer old people like croaking or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's very frustrating because and this is actually a tactic espoused by certain people who have attempted to attack, or successfully, I might add, the church institutions in the second half of the 20th century. They actually know that this is what you do, right? You call on the institution to water down their standards to appease to your bullshit. And then when they do that, you don't like give in. You just keep pushing for more appeasement. And then by the time you're all said and done, they don't even know where they are. Their own people have left.
Yeah.
And you're, of course, not going to ever adopt their faith. And so they basically completely denature themselves.
Yeah. They just cannibalize themselves.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing about a brand. That's one of the main appeals, is authenticity. People know what you're getting. One of the things that drives me to mass every Sunday is knowing the ritual is the exact same my grandfather did, is the exact same his father did, and I get to see and be a participant in that.
Well,
because
so
psychologically too, it's
like a traditional church, like in DC, I guess they probably have one or two shrines.
Yeah, no. I'm first generation here, but in South America and then in Spain.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's cool because psychologically, like what you're doing with ritual it's very familiar. It's like a staple of your week. It's like a staple of your day, and having that backbone, both with the ritual and also with the church, makes it very easy to step off. Like, okay, I know what I'm getting when I go into these doors. Whereas if you're constantly adjusting yourself to, like you said, people are sabotaging your brand on purpose, then yeah, you're gonna lose on both ends.
It's not even so much the change itself. It's just that like all the changes that have been made are literally worse. Like the music gotten worse, right? The incense or lack thereof, worse. Incense is nice. Lack of incense, bad. The art has gotten worse. The stained glass, no more stained glass, right? Or like the art on the walls, the stonework, the masonry, gotten worse. Right? Thinking about language too, there's something to be said for the fact that like the liturgical languages of most religious populations is distinct from the spoken everyday language that people use, right?
Yeah.
If you are walking around and you conduct your business and your life in English, and then you go to church and it's in Latin, it it signifies a level of formality and reverence, just like dressing up in your clothes does. Right? You're not using ordinary words. You're using special words. Just like you don't wear sweatpants to go to church, you dress up to go to church.
That's
It's
good.
the
Yeah.
same sort of thing. So it's not even just the fact that there have been changes. It's that whenever changes have been made, they're like not for the best, right? There's plenty of variation within what one might call traditional Christianity. You know, there's plenty of different architectural styles. There's Gothic, there's Baroque, there are like there's Byzantine architecture, there's Russian architecture. I'm sure I'm forgetting to name other styles as well, but there's tons of variation. There's tons of variations in language, in artistic styles too. Like the Orthodox icons vary depending on where in the world you go. The Catholic artwork also varies too. It's not that there's no variance. It's just that the modern version is they just picked bad variation. You know, it's not like they traded out. It's not like McDonald's, right? McDonald's changing their fries isn't the problem. The problem is changing it for something worse. Like if they had swapped out the beef tallow for bison tallow, you would not be hearing any complaints from me. Although technically it's different. But the fact that they swapped out beef tallow for seed oils is the problem.
Yeah. Do you think in the church's example, the degeneration of quality, you are arguing that it was done on purpose, like by design, by bad actors?
I mean, it's not. I don't think it's secretive, or maybe it is, or maybe it is controversial, that the enemies of the institution, one of the ways they wage warfare against it is by getting it to water itself down. That is, I think, as at least in the Catholics' case, pretty well documented if people know where to look. So yeah, I mean, think about it. You're like, hey, there's this 2,000-year-old institution. I hate those guys. Everyone takes it so seriously. How do I attack it? Right? This would be one of your better tactics for doing so. Get it to be less of what it is, so that even its own people don't support it anymore. Pretty clear. And the reference I'm making is Saul Alinsky he was a communist. He wrote a book about how to be a good communist called Rules for Radicals, and this is one of the chapters in there.
Damn, that's
and he's basically saying, hey, this is how you should do it. This is what you do, and that's what has been done. So I mean, yeah.
There's also like an element of like karmic retribution where you really do break down someone's spirit if you tell them beforehand like what you're going to do to them, and then you get their permission and then you do it anyways. So there's that too at play.
Sure.
So Steven, I actually have your Masa Chips here. Appreciate it, by the way. I didn't know if I was going to do this or not, but I love all the ingredients here. I figured I could do like my first tasting live here on the show.
Go for it.
Dude, I wanted to eat this when I got here, but figured I'd save it.
When did we send these over? Was it recently?
Yeah, it was like 5 days ago or something.
Oh, nice. Cool. Good timing.
Yeah, man. All right. These look great. It's like you guys didn't skimp it either. Like it's actually pretty full of chips.
You got to get the crunch of the microphone. No, the fresh crunch. Yeah.
That's so good, dude. That's actually really good, bro. This is fantastic, man. Oh, yeah. I want to ask you about this. What is nixtamalization or nixtamalized?
Nixtamalization is the traditional Aztec invented process by which you make corn more digestible and prepare it for consumption. So there's this, you know how Paul Saladino, for example, might talk about how seeds don't want to be eaten, right? Plants don't want to be eaten, right? Plants have these defense chemicals that prevent them from, being healthy. Yes, that's true for the most part. And what's also true, though, is that every traditional culture who survived off of eating plants developed ways of preparing those plants that increase their digestibility and
sprouting,
nutrient availability, whatever. So sourdough bread is a great example. By fermenting the flour using sourdough starter, it literally reduces the gluten content. It inhibits phytic acid and certain other anti-nutrients and makes the bread easier to digest. And so the version of that for corn is called nixtamalization. You basically boil the corn along with sodium hydroxide, or I believe, or is it calcium hydroxide? Limestone, literally like the rock. You crush up limestone and you boil corn in that. You soak it, you rinse it, and then you grind it up. And then that thing, that ground up nixtamalized corn paste, is called masa. That's where the name Masa Chips comes from.
Yep.
And then you can turn that into tortillas. You can turn that into all sorts of, traditional Central American corn products. And as far as the benefits, like specifically, are concerned, so it kills a bunch of the mycotoxins that might otherwise be present on unprepared corn. It makes one of the B vitamins more bioavailable. I forget. I think it's B1. It might be B3. But there's this disease that, of course, like people who adopt people who adopted corn, especially in the South, there was an illness they would get, a nutrient deficiency from lack of this certain B vitamin, because they would eat their corn without nixtamalizing it. And so, they didn't grow up with corn. Corn is not native to Europe. And so the Europeans who came didn't realize you were supposed to do this. They didn't do it, and they developed all these nutrient deficiencies. But this problem never occurred to the Aztecs because they knew how to properly treat it. Anyway, that is what nixtamalization means. That's what we do. And a lot of corn tortilla chip producers do not do that. And so you're eating the corn in its less digestible state. And so, you hear the people are like, I don't eat grains, I don't eat corn, blah, 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 blah. Just like gluten and bread, the problem is not the gluten itself or the bread itself. The problem is the version that you're eating, which happens to be bad. Everyone goes to Italy and it's like, oh, I ate all the bread I wanted and I felt great and I lost 10 pounds. Well, the gluten or the bread that they're growing, like they're making in Italy, is produced from wheat that is not some modern hybridized strain. It doesn't have all the pesticides we use. It's not sprayed with folic acid, which is like a quote unquote nutrient, a synthetic nutrient that's not actually absorbable by the body, designed to replace the folate that is removed when you turn flour into white flour. And that's sprayed in every crop of wheat grown in America. Anyways, they don't have that in Italy. And then most of the times the bread is sourdough. And so then you're saying you eat that and you felt good, but Wonder Bread makes you feel bad. Well, I wonder why,
Yeah.
You're not eating the same thing. All right. This is another thing, going back to this sort of sensitivity or nuance or distinction discussion. Like, there are, when humans label a concept with a word, all of a sudden, and this is what people sort of mean when they say words have power, right? When you label something with a word, instantly everything that has that word is now the same in your head.
Associated, yeah.
When I say bread, right, all of the things that are called bread are now equivalent. When I say milk, all of the things that are called milk are now equivalent. And so I could be describing, milk from the convenience store that's high temperature pasteurized from some factory farm where the cows are fed soy and pesticide corn and pumped full of hormones. That's milk, right? But the Amish raw milk from pasture raised regenerative cows, 100% grass fed, like milked by hand and then delivered to me the next day, that's also milk. And those two things are not the same. They might look similar, or butter, same thing. Yeah. But it doesn't even look the same. Like the butter I get is bright yellow. And if you go to any store and buy butter, it's usually pretty pale. It's almost white. Those two things are called butter, but they're not the same thing. They're similar maybe, but they're not the same thing. And so the same thing happens with bread, right? The bread I ate in Italy was bread, and the bread I eat in, at the grocery, at Subway, that's bread too. But it's not the same thing. And by having this such a myopic, short-sighted language without the way to express all this variance, we sort of do this to ourselves. We make it so that that variation is not even possible to be thought of, right?
Yeah.
Unless you spend your time nerding out over it. And this is kind of what you get, right? In domains where people like have some sort of expertise, a terminology is built around the set of concepts in that domain that allow people to express this nuance. So for example, if I a screw, right? The little spiral thing that you fastener, right? There's screws, there's bolts, there's lag bolts, there's like all sorts of terminology for screws that some engineer or builder with mechanical inclinations will have to describe all the different versions of these things.
Yeah.
Right. Just like metal, right? Most people, if they see, right, what's this red light panel made of? Oh, it's made of metal. What's this like drawer of my desk made of? Oh, it's made of metal. Oh yeah, but is it aluminum? Is it stainless steel? Is it steel? Is it bronze? Is it tin? Is it brass? Right? Like copper? They have no idea. Is it gold? Right? Wines, you know, there's red wine and white wine. That's what most people know of. But if you talk to a sommelier, there's a billion, there's Chiantis and Chardonnays and blah, blah, blahs, right? And each of those expresses a different thing. And if you look at, for example, the number of words people know, right? Our vocabulary is shrinking. And so if you think about the consequences of this, what that means is that the number of things we can think about shrinks.
Wow.
In order to think about a new thing, you need a word for the thing.
Right.
So in order for me to think about the difference between the Amish milk that I described and the supermarket milk, I need different words, right? And we sort of have them in the health world. We have raw milk and we have ultra high temperature pasteurized and all these things. But to the average person, again, it's just milk. And so the lack of vocabulary means we'll fail to appreciate these nuances and therefore be satisfied with an inferior replacement, so long as it's called the same thing. Coca-Cola, great example. I learned today that I learned recently a few things. First of all, do you know what cola is in Coca-Cola?
Cola, just sugar water, is it?
No, what does the word cola come from? Why is there cola?
I don't know.
Well, first off, cola is a nut.
Okay.
It's a cola nut. It comes from West Africa or something, and it kind of looks like chocolate. It's a nut that you can crush up, and it has certain properties. For example, it has caffeine in it, and it has certain other plant chemicals that help make it like it's good for when you're sick. It actually aids and encourages digestion.
Okay.
So if you think about all these things, these properties of the cola nut, Coca-Cola, or a drink made from the cola nut with carbonated water and, for example, ginger, which aids digestion.
Yeah.
This is a medicinal beverage that I might want to drink after I ate a lot, and it, you know, helps move digestion along. It's also like a stimulant, right? So it helps stimulate digestion. Now that is a good drink, right?
Yeah.
And 100 years ago, that's probably what you were getting when you purchased Coca-Cola. But the Wikipedia article for the cola nut talks about this. It says how Coca-Cola and other competitors no longer even claim to use the cola nut in any of their beverages. Like the cola nut, which Coca-Cola is named after.
Yeah.
Like Coca-Cola is named after cocaine and the cola nut, right? Combine those two things, you get Coca-Cola. They don't even use the cola nut anymore. And I don't believe they use cocaine anymore either. So it's like, it's not Coca-Cola, but it's called Coca-Cola. And so you pull the wool over people's eyes because you use the word Coca-Cola.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The association is so strong. You just,
right. Yeah. Oh, it's Coke. Yeah. Obviously, it's the same thing. It's always been the same. No. Right.
Well, I think soon the same thing's going to happen with chips. I mean, people are going to be like, oh, right now people have like one idea of chips.
Yeah.
Think chips. I think of potato chips. Right.
Right.
But over time, you get more products like this. People get more introduced to the idea. I think that's why people like you and you're doing this, really need to pump these words back into circulation with a different context. For instance, nixtamalization, like that word I've never heard of before, but soon enough people are going to know about it so frequently it's almost overnight. Like 10 years ago, I don't think many people knew what a ketone was, right? But now people know what ketones are. Like over time, people just associate new words. Like you said, we need to expand the vocabulary. I think that's why content's so helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's actually a challenge, right? That like I and others have, which is like the food, quote unquote, that you can get at your average grocery store, it shouldn't even be called food. Yeah. But if people aren't going to stop calling that food, then we need to think of other words to call our thing. Yeah. That signifies something else. You know, it's actually a challenge, right? Like Masa chips are still tortilla chips, but you know, technically, but they're not the same as these other things. So, and maybe that's where the sort of the brand word comes in. So I forget the name for this, but the example is Kleenex, right? Mm-hmm. The Kleenex brand of facial tissue became so prominent that people refer to facial tissues as Kleenex. Like my grandma, she'd be like, "Oh, your
Mm.
nose is running. You need a Kleenex."
Yeah.
Right. So I forget the term for that in marketing, but it's a good thing when your brand becomes so powerful that it's used as the generic name for that concept. And so that's maybe where our hope lies here, right? Like, no,
Yeah.
these aren't tortilla chips; they're Masa chips. What are you
Yeah.
talking about, right? Like, maybe that's where we have to go with
That's the
it.
tallow chip. Yeah.
Yeah. So and Masa chips is actually, it's not like Kleenex. It's not like a made up word. Like masa is a real word in Spanish, and it
Yeah.
pretty much is exactly, this is exactly right. Like we make chips out of masa. That's what a masa chip is.
That's why I got so excited when I saw it. I immediately knew what it was. I was like, oh my, like you're talking about word association. This was really strong for me. I was like, there's no way. Hold on. That's cool.
Oh, interesting. Oh, so
Yeah.
because you already knew what masa was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, most Americans do not know what that is. They're like, oh, masa, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you already knew what it was, and you were like, oh, is that the same masa? And turns out it is.
Yeah. I saw 3 ingredients. I'm like, he did it. So that's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, man. Well, Steven, I really appreciate your time, bro. I really, I've been following you for a while. I really appreciate your content. One thing I've always asked guests in the beginning, and I just started again recently, is the following question. If you could have dinner and meet someone, who would it be? A, if they were a real person, like dead or alive, and B, a fictional person.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, just dinner or hang out with them, whatever. But you have an evening with them.
This is yeah. Let me think. I would probably answer. I mean, this type of question is always bound to end up with like generic answers, I feel like. I guess you could say I'll do JFK. Fine. I'll do JFK as my real person.
Nice.
JFK is my real person. And imagine, you mean like a fictional character, like from some like movie or book or something?
Yeah, or a movie. Yeah.
Okay. We could do Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. Let's go there.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's a real hero.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you read the books?
Yeah, I've read the books. I actually preferred the movies, which is probably quite possibly controversial. I mean, everyone always like the books are always better. Whatever it is, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, this or that. But I actually think the movies were better, specifically around their portrayal of Aragorn. Personally, like in the movies, Aragorn is like he has more depth than in the books. Right from the first minute you meet Aragorn in the books, he's like, "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn. I will be king of Middle Earth again, and I'm going to reclaim my rightful throne." And blah blah blah. And then he just goes and does it. There's no like character development in my view there. Whereas in the movies, you meet him and he's like this sort of tortured soul trying to like run away from his destiny, and then ultimately, grows into the position, and then like finally fulfills that and accepts his like duty or whatever, which is very, very different than the books. And so I think that's like a big loss that the books, or a big thing the books miss in that regard. Yeah,
it's like the Gary Cooper strong silent type.
I mean, there's no personal struggle or change or whatever. So it's I guess it's less, I hate to use the word relatable, or like it's less of an example, or it's less there's less that you can like learn from this as a normal person. Right? Like good stories have people who like overcome some issue and they like grow and change as a person, and then it's not like they just show up and then they do A, B, and C and then win. It's like there has to be a transformation of the character in order to accomplish the winning. And that's a big distinction. Just like, and this is the criticism, and it's interesting, the criticism of like the modern Star Wars movies. Like the girl Rey, I guess that's her name. Yeah. I've only watched the first of those, by the way. I refuse to watch the others, but I know enough what happens. Like she shows up with her skills already developed. Yeah. Like there's no growth. There's no, especially personal growth. It's not even like learning how to be a Jedi, right? Like the original Star Wars movies have this whole narrative of like, not only does Luke need to learn the physical skills, right? There's like the personal failings that he must overcome, the impetuousness, the immaturity, like the whininess that he has when he was younger. He has to like overcome those qualities and like develop develop his character as a person.
Yeah.
You know, in addition to learning the skills that he needs to learn. And so that is like an example of a good character. But if he already like knows everything and already has the character traits and that's not like a character, that's like an NPC basically.
Yeah.
Even though it's an protagonist, it's still an NPC.
Yeah, it's one dimensional. Yeah. We want to see the depth. You're so right. That's funny. I think you might like this, but I recently was talking to someone and Lord of the Rings came up. We were talking about the existence of God, and we were talking. It was pretty philosophical, and we were talking about like maybe the utility of God is more important than proving the existence of God. I just happen to believe in both. And then he was really arguing against the existence of God, and I go, think about this: you have the Shire, you have Gimli, you have all these things. Every blade of grass in that Middle Earth, there's not one word that mentions Tolstein, but he's present in the whole thing. Like this is
That's great. That's a great analogy.
So that's like one way I phrased it. So that came to mind.
That's really smart. Did you make that up? That's a great.
No, I think someone was telling me some similar metaphor. It was different books, obviously.
Sure. I mean, the concept that's a great concept. I've never heard that argument before. That's really good. What did your friend say?
He liked it. He was like, "Oh, that's really good." Reflected.
That is really good.
That's great when you talk with like spiritually healthy people who are open. Like he's agnostic. Like he's not atheistic. He doesn't have the ego, I like to think. But yeah, it's good to talk about.
I mean, like the atheist position is pretty like indefensible because like something started the universe.
Yeah.
Like okay, the Big Bang. It's still God. It's still God. Just you called it Big Bang.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Like some force created the universe, obviously, because we're here, and you can't have something that came out of nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so if someone created the universe or some entity created the universe, then your job as a human is pretty obvious to first identify that entity and then do whatever he wants. Because if he is powerful enough to create the universe, he's powerful enough to make your life really freaking miserable if he wants, or really great if he also wants. And so you should figure out who it is and then do what that person wants you to do, or do what that entity wants you to do.
Yeah.
Like now that's like a level of argumentation, you know, certainly like prior to like, oh, which religion, right? But the goal should be the goal is pretty obvious. Like figure out who it is and then figure out what he wants you to do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said earlier, with the whole food sensitivity thing, the step one is recognizing a problem, recognizing that there is, and then you can fix it. If for you think you don't have a God, you really do. It's whatever value you hold above the rest. That's serving as your de facto God.
Yeah, that's whatever you're worshiping. Certainly.
Yeah, exactly.
They might not think of it as like a god because money didn't create the universe, which is obviously true, but you might still worship money. But something created it, right? Who set off the Big Bang? This is a fun way of I heard this at some point, I forget where. Basically, the modern rationalistic quote unquote worldview, like it came out of this idea that people were sort of disenchanted with the idea of miracles. They didn't like the fact that miracles could exist. So instead, they created a system where you trade all these tiny little miracles from, Jesus or Moses and the burning bush and the Red Sea and a world of all these tiny miracles. You trade that for a worldview that just has no small miracles, but one big miracle. And the big miracle is the Big Bang, right? Because it's still a miracle. There's no explanation for that. But people are like, oh, there's no miracles in science. Well, there is. There's just a huge miracle. You just ignore that because it's just one of them. So you ignore it most of the time. But you still have a miracle. Like there's no worldview that enables you to have no miracles. So and it's really quite silly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stephen, I really appreciated the chat. It was what took some pleasant turns. I really liked it. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
same. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, brother.